Maddie, guess what? Guess what? I finally figured out how to make myself human.
Oh, really, Mary Sue? Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, all I gotta do is get someone to fall in love with me.
Oh, is that all?
Die in a dramatic sacrificial scene.
I like that part.
Then they kiss me when I'm dead.
Because necrophilia is the backbone of the entire history of animation.
And that will bring me back to life and make me human.
Isn't that Disney movie magic logic? You do realise that will never...
Disney movie magic logic also defies all laws of time and space.
And screws over the little guy, it seems.
Maddie.
No.
Mad.
Seriously,
Mad.
Don't.
Mad.
No.
Do you wanna review Frozen?
Oh my god! It's been a year since the release of Disney's 53rd animated feature, and it shows no signs of going into exile anytime soon, as much as many of us wish it to. Frozen has such successful commercial appeal that it is still being replayed in theatres a year after its initial release date. So, what is it about this movie? What is it that gives everyone and their cousin Frozen fever? I'm lucky because I already have a heart of ice, so I'm completely immune to frozen fever. Right, Amy?
Heart of ice? Yeah, definitely.
Is that an Olaf doll?
What? An Olaf doll? Where? Ah! Right, I have no idea where that doll came from. It's not mine, seriously. Ah!
Amy, you have frozen fever, don't you?
No.
Well, what's that poster behind you then?
What poster? Ah!
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 Let it go, la la la.
Okay, Mary Sue, listen, we've got a serious case of frozen fever here. What's the cure? Any ideas?
Go down to the Winchester and wait for this whole thing to blow over?
No, that's what we do for a zombie outbreak.
Go to see the wizard in Emerald City.
No, we did that already, remember? We needed to get you a brain.
Oh yeah. Throw the DVD into the fires of Mount Doom?
We discussed this. I'm a Dooney, not a hobbit.
Well, that's it. I'm out of ideas.
Okay, hang on. I'm calling a professional.
Ahoy hoy!
Hey, Dr. Wolf, it's Mad Munchkin.
Ah, hello, Miss Mad Munchkin. It's great to hear from you. Were you needing to schedule another appointment, or just hoping for a chat?
Actually, I have a question for you. I have this, friend who is obsessed with Disney's Frozen.
Ah, yes. Frozen fever. I know the condition well.
So what's the cure, Doc?
Well, along with many other highly praised films throughout the decades, there's always going to be some fan fervor that comes with them. I admit that I never expected Frozen to leave such an overwhelming impact, but it's not the first Disney movie to do so. I can still remember all the hype and merchandise surrounding Lion King when it first came out. And that film got re-released in theaters as well. I know that both seeing and hearing Frozen in so many ways, both on and offline, can be a little overwhelming at times, but in my opinion, the best way to deal with Frozen fever is to just give it time. Eventually, there will be something new that comes along and starts leaving its own impact in the world, and we just need to let it be, as it were. Do you think you can try that with your friend, Miss Munchkin?
Nah, I don't think so. Well, that was about as helpful as a chocolate kettle. Maybe if I take a closer look at this, we'll get to the bottom of it and finally find a cure for frozen fever. Just remember your promise, Mary Sue. Do not sing Let It Go.
I know.
Great! Now that's out of the way, let's take a look at Disney's Frozen. God help us all.
'Cause for the first time in forever, there'll be magic, there'll be heart. For the first time in forever, the video's not about how to buy her art.
Yeah, because heaven forbid a self-employed freelance artist would use YouTube to advertise her art, right?
It's tough being a frustrated artist, isn't it? Well, it's times like this you just pick yourself up, brush yourself down.
Oh my god, Mary Sue, shut up! Frozen has been labelled as the most successful animated movie of all time, and to its credit, has a lot of elements within it that earns it that title. Other than the ice elemental. What? You knew there was going to be a lot of ice jokes in this review. You're just lucky I have resisted using the obligatory Mr. Freeze reference. Regardless of my opinion of Frozen, you can't argue with the facts. It is Disney's first animated feature-length movie to win the Oscar for Best Animated Feature and the second Disney movie to win a Golden Globe for Best Animated Feature, the first being Disney's Tarzan, which was released in the year 2000. It is Disney's first animated movie to be directed by a woman, making Jennifer Lee, the movie's director, the first female director of a feature film that grossed more than $1 billion in box office revenue. You go girl! Note to self, don't do that again. Frozen marks Disney's second adaptation of a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, the first being The Little Mermaid, released in 1989. Like I said in my review for The Little Mermaid, any story has to be changed when adapted to film, and Disney has its own legacy to uphold, so further changes are to be expected. I have to admit, until deciding to do this review, I was not familiar with the story whatsoever, and saw Frozen without having any knowledge of the source material, so was able to enjoy and analyse it for what it was, and not be worried about how good an adaptation it was. I knew that it was based on the tale The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen, but had not read or been familiar with anything else based on it. Amazingly enough, Andersen wrote the tale in just 5 days, and was his longest story that he ever published. The original story is episodic and bleak, but had captured the imaginations of artists all over the world, even if the title character is not the main focus of the story and only appears in perhaps 2 chapters of the story at the most. After reading the original story, I have a new respect for this movie. The idea of a frozen heart, a tainted soul or a broken spirit is still very evident in this version of the story of the Snow Queen, and as far as a faithful adaptation goes, I have to say this fails in every way to be a successful retelling of the original fairy tale, but the same can be said for every single Disney movie based on a fairy tale, and indeed any movie based on a Hans Christian Andersen story. In 1931, Disney released The Ugly Duckling's Silly Symphony based on the Hans Christian Andersen story of the same name and released a remake in 1939. I think it is pretty evident that Disney and Andersen had a lot in common, both coming from humble upbringings and both becoming world famous in their storytelling, both using similar themes in the stories they chose to tell. Stories usually about underdogs or oddballs or someone pushing through hard times and staying focused on their goal and never losing their true selves or losing their faith. In 1938, Mary Goodrich said that the story of the Snow Queen at its core is a story about regeneration of faith. And I suppose that could still be said about Frozen, though I think this phrase means a restoration of faith in humanity and self, rather than a faith in an unseen force or deity. The first known animated adaptation of the Snow Queen was released in Soviet Russia in 1957 from Universal Pictures. The first adaptation is a pretty faithful retelling of the story, as it is pretty much the original story from the book, but that doesn't automatically make it a successful movie. As charming as this movie is, and as faithful as it is to the book, it fails to captivate the viewer the same way as the fairy tale itself did. This is a common problem with many of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, which is why drastic changes have to be made when adapting them to film. 20th Century Fox released an animated feature based on the Hans Christian Andersen story of Thumbelina in 1994, directed by Don Bluth. In my opinion, Thumbelina was a highly successful adaptation of the story and proves that an Andersen tale could successfully be created in film, but just trips at the finish line because it blatantly rips off the Disney formula, even using the same singing voice for Thumbelina that Disney used for Ariel in 1989. Both are tales about a girl wanting more out of life, and that more thing centered around finding a man. Let's face it, the whole "someday my prince will come" thing is what the Disney legacy is based on, and that legacy is somewhat outdated and old-fashioned in today's culture. Yeah, keep telling yourself that, toots. Disney has attempted to adapt this story as early as the 1930s, and similar to The Little Mermaid, started life as a possible Silly Symphony short, but the idea was later abandoned because of difficulties adapting the character of the Snow Queen for film. In the year 2000, the story of the Steadfast Tin Soldier was included in Fantasia 2000, and in 2006, The Little Match Girl was also adapted into a short, twice more proving that Disney could make an Andersen's tale into film successfully when handled right. Not to mention they've proven that they can still make grown-ups cry like little girls after all these years. for God's sake! The story of the Snow Queen was picked up during the Disney's Renaissance in the 90s, but the project was dropped yet again in 2002, and an adaptation of the Brothers Grimm fairy tale Rapunzel, named Tangled, was released in 2010 instead. After the success of Tangled, it seemed that Disney could not let go of the idea of adapting the Snow Queen into a Disney feature, and the project was again picked up. Originally intended to be a 2D animated feature to follow Disney Princess and the Frog, it was decided that the story would be adapted into a fully CG feature, just like Tangled. Well, it definitely explains a lot about the similarities in the character designs anyway, doesn't it? The first song of the movie, Frozen Heart, channels another classic Disney scene from another movie that explores a character's full potential.
Here's the song that no one remembers at the start of the movie. It's got ice and snowflakes and mountains and establishes the story.
Are you done?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay, just checking. The scene in Dumbo when the circus people erect the tent. Song of the Roustabouts tell us that Dumbo's life is going to be full of hard work and hardships, and Frozen Heart does the same for this movie. Dumbo is a very simple story, and for me has a lot in common with Frozen in the way that it tells its story. It's all conveyed in the visuals with very little explanatory dialogue. I would have liked to have seen something more stylised like Song of the Roustabouts, having these generic background characters in silhouette, giving the movie a much more mysterious feel. Unlike Tangled, which delivered its narrative in a direct way, having Eugene narrate the expositional dialogue, Frozen has a much more minimalistic approach to its storytelling, having most of the storytelling and exposition being told through song, or through subtle visuals. Visually, Frozen and Tangled obviously have a lot in common, and from a narrative standpoint, Tangled is a much better structured movie. We know the how, the why, and we can see the structure of the story of Tangled exposes the plot points in a very obvious way. With Frozen, however, that is not as direct. We're never told how exactly Elsa got her powers. All we know is, well, her father says she was born with them.
Gee, that's convenient, isn't it? Maddie, is it just me, or are the trolls in this movie used as a writer's convenience?
No, it's not just you, Mary Sue. They're also used to force a pointless song to prolong Anna's suffering, just to,
You should be with Kristoff, not Hans.
Oh, yeah. Spoilers. Can I just mention here that naming the villain after the author of the story the movie is based on is highly inappropriate. It's not clever, it's disrespectful.
Let's get down to business to defeat the Hans.
That is insanely flat. That song isn't even in this movie.
Yeah, I know, but it's pretty clever, right?
You stole that from an internet meme.
Oh yeah, like you've never done that before.
Moving on. For me, we don't really need to know how or why. What's important is how her powers affect her and her family. This, I feel, is why Frozen is so successful. In Dumbo, for example, it's very much a story about a mother and child. And we're never told how or why he has big ears, he's just born with them. And the rest of the story shows us how this so-called deformity affects his everyday life, how it affects his relationship with his mother, and how people around him are affected and react. Elsa obviously doesn't have big ears, or obvious deformities of any kind, but both Dumbo's ears and Elsa's cryokinetic powers represent those things that affect our lives that can be misinterpreted as flaws or inconveniences, things that should be hidden away but are in fact our biggest strengths, and the things that set us apart from other people in a good way. Of course, Dumbo is that of an age of a child who is oblivious to the thing that makes him different and doesn't understand that he is being shunned because of it. Frozen is a story about a girl who is fully aware that she is different and grows up knowing that this thing that makes her different is highly dangerous and harmful to others, and is put under pressure to conceal it from those she loves instead of sharing it, causing her fear to consume her and eventually causes her to go into exile. Right at Frozen's heart is a story about a family that has been torn apart by tragedy and fear. As much as I love the minimalistic approach to storytelling, I wish the visuals supported the same style of delivery, at least in the opening sequence anyway. As much fear and tragedy that is at the heart of Frozen, what thaws it out is love, or more specifically the love between siblings. Siblings, and more specifically sisters, is a relationship that hasn't been explored to great depths in Disney movies, sisters in particular. In Disney's Cinderella, released in 1950, the relationship between Cinderella and her stepsisters is more that of mistress and servant. Ariel had sisters as well, but next to no interaction is seen with them. The first Disney movie to explore the relationship of two sisters in greater depth was in Lilo and Stitch, which was released in 2002, but was not the main focus on for the story, and the age gap made for a different dynamic. It was refreshing to have a Disney story be that of two sisters, and that the usual Disney formula of the princess finds her prince is not present here, and is instead a footnote to the story. Saying that though, the movie does deal with that formula head on, when Elsa says bluntly to Anna after getting engaged to Hans,
"You can't marry a man you just met."
I'm just kidding, sis. Go run off and have your Disney-esque happy ever after.
Okay, sorry. This is the moment we see how different the two sisters really are. There may be a couple of years between them age-wise, but their concept of how the world works and how the world perceives them are worlds apart. While Anna is very much an open door to the world and is impatient to let others be a part of her life, as is conveyed in a very literal sense in the song Love is an Open Door.
Love is an open door.
Why do I get the feeling that all this singing from you is leading up to a cruel irony?
Technically, this whole video is a cruel irony.
Yeah, you've got a point there. Speaking of doors, they are used as a vital set piece throughout the story, and used as symbolic representations of how Elsa and Anna and other characters interact with the world around them. Might it be points in the story where they're letting the world in, letting themselves out, or shutting the world out completely altogether? Elsa is very stiff and reserved, and doesn't let anyone interact with her to a great extent in fear of hurting them, or in fear of being shunned and hated for what she can do. This is of course a mindset that is forced upon her in a sense by her parents, who do so out of good intentions and love, but also out of fear of something they don't understand and cannot change. Instead of nurturing and allowing Elsa to figure things out on her own, she is told to conceal and, to a point, be in denial of her powers. One of the first things that Elsa does when she goes into exile is makes a snowman that later comes to life without any explanation, and Elsa herself can't even explain how she does it. Does this power of being able to create sentient beings out of snow need explained? It would be nice, I guess. But like the rest of the movie, the question of how isn't really explained, but instead the why. Going back to when the sisters were children, their favourite thing to do was play in the snow that Elsa created while indoors. And of course the obvious thing to build with snow is a snowman. For me, the snowman is the last happy memory that Elsa has when it comes to her powers, and also represents the love between her and Anna that has perhaps gone cold. Oh ha 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 ha. Olaf is a vital character in this movie because, in a typical Anderson sense, each and every character has a symbolic meaning, and Olaf represents the innocent love and the joy the sisters once had when they were young before being split up. Likewise, the giant monster snowman that Elsa creates called Marshmallow, that is used to force Anna and Kristoff out of her ice palace, is a representation of fear, something that she has fought against since she was a child. Olaf has the innocence of a small child. He could have easily overtaken the story and become a pointless, annoying sidekick or gimmicky character that does nothing for the story. But for me, his quietness and shyness makes him one of the best side characters I've ever come across in animation. His fascination with summer and heat is not a new thing when it comes to snowmen characters, since Anderson has written a tale on that very subject. But for me, Olaf was a big surprise as to how vital he was symbolically to this story. This movie would not be the same thing without Olaf. So now let's get to the subject of this song. How you doing, Macy? You okay? You're not going to burst out into song at any point soon for a painful, cruel irony? No? You sure? Okay, let's get going. Taken out of context, the song Let It Go is a song about releasing truth and being free of restrictions. It is a song about rejoicing. The two sisters have both been revered as perfect, beautiful and flawless, and this is a lot of pressure to live under. So when Elsa accidentally reveals her powers and makes them public, she forces herself into exile. But the song itself, Let It Go, is a power ballad. It's not a I want song or an I will song as is commonly seen and heard in Disney movies. It is instead an I am song. It is a declaration. Idina Menzel, as I said in my tribute to Wicked and a few of my other videos, is one of my heroes, and the role of Elsa has been compared to the character arc of Elphaba in the stage musical Wicked, as both characters have a lot of similarities. The two songs, Let It Go and Defying Gravity, also have a lot in common. They are both about defiance, rising to a character's full potential. This song, when written for Elsa, was a vital moment for both the character and the movie, as it caused the story and the character to be rewritten, and Elsa was changed from being the villain of the story to one of our main protagonists. However popular and successful both songs are, both songs have been taken out of context so many times that I have experienced people just seem to completely space over what this song Let It Go is actually about. Don't get me wrong, I love the song Let It Go, even if it is oversold and overplayed, as I have already said in previous videos. This is actually a negative moment in the story. Elsa is abandoning her kingdom and putting herself in exile and shutting everyone out of her life, including the audience at one point. How can this song, which is actually covering up something far more tragic, be perceived as something victorious? Regardless of how much this song is overplayed, it is a great song and I do like it, but just please, 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 please stop playing it over and over. The movie, along with everything else it claims to be, is a costume movie, and for an animated movie that is highly unusual. Throughout the movie, items of clothing are used symbolically, but you know, that can be said for a lot of movies. But this one is kind of a bit more obvious. For example, when Elsa removes her cape, this symbolises she is letting go of the weight of the responsibilities she had running a kingdom, everything that was holding her back and slowing her down. When Kristoff removes his hat to keep Anna warm, he is leaving a piece of himself with her, but at the same time, for me, this is the point when Kristoff is truly authentic and shows his true self. When Elsa removes her gloves, she is finally able to be herself. At any point in the movie when we see characters wearing gloves, apart from when they're being used as, a practicality, gloves are worn by people who have responsibilities of running a kingdom or have something to hide. When Hans finally reveals his true self, he removes one of his gloves. It's interesting to see this symbolism used, that gloves are worn by people who are trying to hide who they really are. I'm looking at you, Mary Sue. Just before we round this monster of a video off, there are a few things I'd like to point out about this movie that might shed a little light on why my love for it has dwindled. This has nothing to do with the movie's success, but more to do with my experience with it. The obvious and yet confusing shipping with Elsa and Jack Frost from DreamWorks' Legend of the Guardians, even though my personal favourite is Elsa and the Ice King from Adventure Time pair off. Like I said before, I don't really do shippings, and when I try it's just because I have a very sick sense of humour. So my experience with the fandom of this movie has perhaps hindered my enjoyment of it. What I usually love about Disney movies is the villains, and as such this movie has a pretty weak villain in spite of the unexpected plot twist. But then, when you study it, this movie's villain is technically not personified in just one character, but instead is far more psychological and metaphorical. It may not have the same theatrical flair as most other Disney villains have, but you have to admit, the drama is still there, and the final defeat is still a satisfying conclusion, even if it did seem a little too conveniently timed and staged. It seems to me that perhaps Frozen broke the Disney formula just to show off, rather than to do it to improve on Disney's legacy that is kind of finally catching up with modern day society and culture. Slowly. It is also great to see a Disney movie explore a relationship that is just in its infancy and shows no sign of rushing into anything drastic. So, I think it's about time to sum up here, otherwise this video is going to end up an hour long. Maybe Sue, you better batten down the hatches. Why? We need to prepare for the onslaught of Frozen fangirls and fanboys. Seriously, I hear they're worse than bronies.
Ah, okay.
So, in conclusion, Frozen is a movie that is so successful that it has sadly overstayed its welcome for some people, and sadly due to it being overplayed and plastered in every shop window, in every street, in every town, in every country, I have to admit I have also become sick of it, and it has killed my love for it. I saw this movie in the cinema twice when it was first released, and I loved it so much, and kept telling people how awesome it was to no avail. Of course, a year on, now everyone has noticed it, but now I'm not so hyped up about it. It's a real shame that such a brilliantly creative adaptation of a classic tale has been turned into yet another Disney cash cow. But hey, that's show business, I guess. So, Mary Sue, well done for not singing Let It Go, even though you hummed it.
I tried, but you know, cruel irony jokes.
Yeah, I guess it was expected.
Yep.
So what's next on the agenda?
Well, we move on from one Disney movie to another.
Another Disney movie? Okay, narrow it down for me.
Okay.
Sentient gargoyles.
What?
Sentient Oh no. No. No! Oh no! 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 I am not doing that! No! No!
She's Mad Munchkin.
No!
Stay creative.